In October 1941, deep within the suffocating gray stone walls of Mauthausen concentration camp, Austria, the air smells of old iron and antiseptic. A young, healthy prisoner lies strapped to a wooden slab, his eyes wide, tracking the steady movement of a tall, athletic man with a calm, surgical precision. There is no anesthesia. There is only the glint of a needle filled with gasoline and the chillingly polite smile of a man who views human screams as mere data points. Welcome to the killer's record. Today, we step into the shadow of the most wanted Nazi fugitive in history, Aribert Heim. He didn't just kill, he curated agony, earning a title that would haunt the world for decades: Dr. Death. Year 1914. Bad Radkersburg, Austria. The house of the Heim family is not a home of warmth, but a shrine to absolute order. The air inside smells of floor wax and the stiff starch of a police uniform. Aribert Heim grows up under the shadow of a father whose life is dictated by the rigid statutes of the Austro-Hungarian police force. In this household, silence is a requirement, and a mistake is met not with a lecture, but with a cold, disciplined correction. The boy learns early that emotions are a structural weakness, a leak in a pressurized system that must be plugged. By the late 1920s, Aribert has grown into a physical specimen that commands the room. He is a giant, towering over his peers with a frame built for impact. He finds his sanctuary on the ice of the hockey rink. As a star player for the EHC Linz, he moves with a terrifying mechanical grace. While other players shout and vent their frustrations, Aribert remains a void. When his shoulder connects with an opponent, sending the man crashing into the wooden boards with a bone-shaking thud, Aribert's expression never flickers. He doesn't gloat, he doesn't snarl. He simply resets his position, his eyes as blank and translucent as the ice beneath his skates. Year 1933, Vienna. The city is a boiling pot of political unrest and intellectual rigor, but Aribert is drawn to the sterile silence of the University of Vienna's medical faculty. In the anatomy theater, the air is thick with the cloying, sweet chemical scent of formaldehyde. Most students hesitate before the first incision, their hands trembling as they face the reality of a human corpse. Aribert does not. He approaches the cadaver with the same detachment he showed on the ice. He views the human body not as a vessel for a soul, but as a complex machine, one that can be dismantled, analyzed, and optimized. His surgical precision becomes legendary among his professors, but his peers find his lack of empathy unsettling. Outside the laboratory walls, a new ideology is sweeping through the streets of Vienna, promising a world of purity and strength. To Aribert, the rhetoric of National Socialism sounds less like politics and more like a medical diagnosis. He hears the speeches about social hygiene and the cleansing of the national body and finds them logical. He begins to attend clandestine meetings, standing at the back of the room, his massive arms crossed. He doesn't cheer with the crowd. He observes the speakers with a clinical gaze, assessing the efficiency of their proposed solutions for the ailments of society. The transition from healer to executioner begins in the spring. Aribert graduates as a doctor of medicine, but the traditional oath to do no harm feels like an outdated relic to him. The world is changing, and he intends to be the surgeon who carves out the rot. He walks into a recruitment office with the same steady, rhythmic stride he used on the hockey rink. There is no hesitation in his hand as he signs the papers. He isn't looking for a career in a local clinic. He is looking for a laboratory where the rules of traditional morality no longer apply and where his curiosity can be given absolute, unchecked freedom. Year 1940. Aribert stands before a mirror, adjusting the collar of a new garment. The white coat of the physician has been discarded. In its place is the charcoal gray uniform of the Waffen-SS. On his lapel, the silver Totenkopf, the death's head, glints under the harsh light of the bulb. He traces the shape of the skull with a steady finger, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. He has traded the stethoscope for a symbol of extinction. His orders have arrived, and they point toward a facility where his unique brand of research is not only permitted, but required. Dr. Aribert Heim is no longer just a doctor. He is a weapon of the state, and he is finally heading to the front lines of the nightmare. October 1941. The train tracks leading toward Mauthausen concentration camp are slick with a thin, treacherous layer of frost. Aribert Heim steps onto the wooden platform, the soles of his polished SS boots crunching rhythmically against the frozen gravel. The air here does not just carry the bite of the Austrian winter. It is heavy with a cloying, suffocating scent, a mixture of coal smoke, damp earth, and something sharper, more organic, the metallic tang of old iron and the faint, unmistakable odor of unwashed bodies. He adjusts the peak of his cap, the silver Totenkopf skull glinting under a leaden sky. He does not look like a man arriving at a place of punishment. He looks like a man arriving at a long-awaited inheritance. To his left, the quarry of death looms like a jagged granite maw. From the precipice, Aribert observes hundreds of men reduced to skeletal figures wrapped in tattered striped rags, hauling massive slabs of stone up the 186 uneven steps of the Wienergraben. He watches them not with horror, but with a clinical, detached curiosity. He doesn't see human suffering. He sees a variable in an equation of biological endurance. The wind howls through the double-fenced perimeter, a high-pitched whistle that mimics a distant, never-ending scream. Yet Aribert remains perfectly still. He is searching for the medical barracks, the place where the laws of nature, ethics, and the Hippocratic Oath are about to be dismantled. The meeting with Franz Sires, the camp commandant, takes place in an office that smells of expensive tobacco and floor wax. Sires is a man who speaks in the language of numbers and efficiency, and in Aribert he recognizes a kindred spirit. There is no talk of healing or recovery. Instead, the conversation centers on medical autonomy. Aribert is informed that within the confines of the infirmary, his word is absolute law. He is granted a mandate of total sovereignty over the inmate population. In this damp, wood-paneled room, the state officially hands him the keys to a laboratory of living tissue, thousands of subjects who have already been legally declared dead to the world, leaving them entirely at his disposal. Aribert begins his first walk through the infirmary rows of Block 6. The sound of his boots on the hard linoleum floor is the only thing that breaks the suffocating silence of the ward. As he passes, the men in the bunks, ghosts with sunken eyes and translucent skin, try to shrink into the shadows of their straw mattresses. They have seen doctors before, but Aribert is different. He is tall, athletic, and carries himself with a terrifying, polite composure. He moves past the rows of the dying, his eyes scanning their chests, their limbs, and their throats. He isn't looking for symptoms to treat, he is surveying inventory. The scent of antiseptic here is losing the battle against the stench of gangrene and rot, a smell Aribert breathes in as if it were mountain air. He stops at the bedside of a young prisoner, a former laborer whose once powerful frame has been hollowed out by the quarry. Aribert doesn't reach for a stethoscope or a chart. Instead, he simply stands there, his shadow falling long and dark over the trembling man. He reaches out, his fingers cool and steady, and traces the line of a prominent vein on the prisoner's forearm. A surge of dark realization washes over him, a sense of power more potent than any rank or title. In this room, he is the arbiter of time itself. He can prolong a life for a week or terminate it in a single calculated motion, and the world outside these stone walls will never ask why. He looks down at the terrified man and offers a faint, razor-thin smile. He has found his first subject, and the needle in his mind is already beginning to move. Year 1941, Mauthausen concentration camp. Aribert Heim reaches into the pocket of his crisp white lab coat and pulls out a silver stopwatch. The metal is cool against his palm, a precision instrument for a man obsessed with the mechanics of the end. Before him, the young laborer from the infirmary bed is now strapped to a wooden table, his chest bared to the flickering light of the overhead bulb. There is no malice in the doctor's eyes, only the terrifying, focused clarity of a mathematician about to solve an equation. He isn't looking at a man, he is looking at a biological countdown. The infirmary smells of stale sweat and the biting, chemical-sharp scent of phenol. Two SS orderlies stand at the head of the table, their hands heavy on the prisoner's shoulders. The young man's ribs protrude like the hull of a wrecked ship, his skin stretched thin over a heart that is currently hammering at a frantic, terrified pace. Aribert watches the pulse jump in the man's neck. He doesn't offer a word of comfort or a sedative. Instead, he checks the tension of the syringe, the long needle glinting as it catches the light. The room is thick with a suffocating silence, broken only by the distant, rhythmic clinking of hammers from the stone quarry outside. To the prisoners, that sound is the beat of their slow death. To Aribert, it is merely background noise to his own private symphony of data. He has decided that the traditional methods of execution are too messy, too loud, and, most importantly, too unrefined. He wants to know the exact moment the soul vacates the vessel. He wants to witness the transition from biology to debris measured to the millisecond. Heim positions the needle over the left side of the prisoner's chest, finding the gap between the fourth and fifth ribs. His thumb hovers over the start button of the stopwatch. "Hold him," he commands, his voice a calm, clinical monotone. Click. The stopwatch begins its frantic march. He drives the needle deep, piercing the pectoral muscle and plunging directly into the heart's chamber. The prisoner's body jolts, a silent, choked gasp escaping his lips as the toxic phenol floods his lifeblood. Aribert's eyes never leave the man's face. He watches the pupils dilate, the sudden violent tremor of the limbs, in the way the light in the victim's eyes flickers like a candle in a gale. 10 seconds, 15. The man's skin begins to take on a waxy gray hue. Aribert leans in closer, his breath ghosting over the victim's cheek, monitoring the exact second the last muscle fiber stops twitching. Click. He stops the watch at 22 seconds. With a practiced, effortless motion, he withdraws the needle and steps back, the dead man's body settling into a heavy, final stillness. The orderlies look to the doctor, waiting for a reaction, but Aribert is already reaching for his clipboard. He records the time with the same indifference one might use to log the temperature of a room. Word of the stopwatch doctor begins to ripple through the upper echelons of the SS hierarchy at Mauthausen. This isn't just killing, it is an industrial optimization of death. Aribert's efficiency becomes his trademark. Over the following weeks, the infirmary is no longer a place of even nominal healing. It is a laboratory where the primary variable is the human heart. He experiments with different dosages, different entry points, always with the silver watch in hand, seeking a record-breaking speed for termination. He has found his rhythm, but the clinical satisfaction is starting to give way to a darker, more aesthetic curiosity. By late October, the tally of treated subjects grows, but the data is becoming repetitive. Aribert sits in his office, the stopwatch resting on his desk next to a stack of new prisoner intake forms. He flips through the black and white photographs of the condemned until he stops at a portrait of an 18-year-old boy. The boy possesses a striking, symmetrical face and a set of teeth so perfect they look like carved ivory. Aribert traces the outline of the boy's jaw in the photo, a faint, razor-thin smile touching his lips. He has seen enough of how men die. Now he wants to see what he can keep of them. He reaches for a red pencil and circles the boy's name, marking him not for a timed execution, but for a special kind of preservation.
The morning mist clings to the granite walls of Mauthausen concentration camp, a cold, suffocating shroud that smells of coal smoke and despair. Aribert Heim walks through the mud-slicked paths of the yard, his black boots polished to a mirror shine. He isn't looking for workers or rebels today. He is looking for an aesthetic. He stops at the edge of a labor detail where a young man, barely 18, is struggling with a heavy stone. The boy's skin is stretched thin over his frame, but his bone structure is undeniable, symmetrical, elegant, and strong. Aribert signals for the guards to pull the boy from the line. The youth collapses, trembling, his breath coming in ragged white puffs in the freezing air. Aribert doesn't shout. He doesn't strike the boy. Instead, he reaches out with a gloved hand and gently tilts the boy's chin upward, as if examining a piece of fine porcelain. "What is your name?" he asks, his voice a soft, cultured baritone that sounds hauntingly out of place in this graveyard of men. The boy stammers a response, his eyes wide with a flicker of hope at the doctor's apparent kindness. Aribert smiles, a thin, clinical expression, and runs a thumb along the boy's jawline. "Open your mouth, please." The boy complies, revealing a set of teeth that are remarkably straight and white, untouched by the decay that has claimed most of the camp's population. They are perfect. Aribert leans in closer, the scent of his expensive cologne mixing with the boy's stench of sweat and fear. "You are a very lucky young man," Aribert whispers, his eyes fixated on the boy's mouth. "You have a gift. I have decided to give you a special assignment. You will come with me to the infirmary. There will be no more rocks, no more hunger, just rest." He signals to the orderlies. To the boy, this feels like a miracle, a divine intervention from the man in the clean white coat. He follows Aribert toward the medical wing, his steps lightened by the delusion of survival, unaware that he has been selected not for his life, but for the ivory-white architecture beneath his skin. Inside the infirmary, the hum of the overhead lights is the only sound in the sterile room. Aribert prepares the table with a slow, rhythmic grace. He speaks to the boy throughout the process, his tone conversational, almost fatherly. "Count backward from 10 for me," he says, adjusting the mask over the boy's face. As the youth slips into unconsciousness, the kind doctor's demeanor shifts. The stopwatch remains in his pocket. Time is irrelevant for this project. He reaches for a scalpel, but not for an injection. He works with the precision of a master craftsman, his hands steady as he begins the process of harvesting. The sound of a surgical saw cutting through bone echoes against the tiled walls, a rhythmic, grating noise that continues long after the boy's heart has stopped beating. Days later, the infirmary laboratory smells of something cloying and heavy, the scent of organic matter being boiled away in a vat of chemicals. Aribert stands over the steaming pot, watching with clinical patience. He eventually retrieves the object with long metal tongs.
It is a human skull, scrubbed clean of its identity, every trace of the 18-year-old boy gone, except for that perfect symmetrical jaw and the ivory teeth that first caught Aribert's eye. He spends the afternoon treating the bone, polishing it until it gleams under the desk lamp like a piece of rare sculpture. He wires the jaw shut, ensuring the perfect smile is locked in place forever. The transformation is complete. The boy is no longer a prisoner, a number, or a human being. He is a paperweight. Aribert sits at his mahogany desk, casually setting the skull down atop a stack of execution reports. He runs a finger over the smooth parietal bone, admiring how the light dances off the polished surface. The aesthetic project has been a success, but the stillness of the object begins to bore him. He looks toward the infirmary doors, his mind wandering back to the living. He has mastered the preservation of the dead, but now he wonders how much agony the living body can truly endure before the spark of life finally flickers out. He picks up a fresh needle, his gaze turning toward the cabinet filled with experimental chemicals.
November 1941, Mauthausen concentration camp. Aribert Heim stands in the center of the infirmary, the polished skull of the 18-year-old boy still resting on his desk in the adjacent office like a silent trophy. For Aribert, phenol has become predictable. The stopwatch clicks, the heart stops, the data is recorded. It is too efficient, too clean. He craves a deeper understanding of the breaking point, not just when the heart stops, but how much trauma the human machine can endure before it totalizes. He turns toward his medical cabinet, his eyes scanning the rows of glass vials. He is no longer looking for a sedative or a cure. He is looking for a catalyst for agony. He selects a new subject, a middle-aged man whose body is a roadmap of scars from the stone quarry. There is no pretense of a checkup this time. Aribert prepares a large syringe, but the liquid inside is clear and smells sharply of the motor pool. It is pure petrol. As he plunges the needle directly into the man's chest, the room is suddenly filled with the pungent, oily stench of gasoline. The reaction is instantaneous. The prisoner's eyes bulge, his veins turning into thick black cords as the fuel enters his bloodstream. He doesn't just die, he combusts from the inside out. Aribert leans in close, his face inches from the victim's gasping mouth, watching the frantic, rhythmic drumming of the chest wall. He isn't looking for a heartbeat, he is watching the chemical destruction of living tissue. The experiments escalate into a macabre trial of substances. He moves from petrol to water, wanting to see how the heart reacts to the sudden, overwhelming pressure of a non-biological fluid. Then comes the magnesium. When injected into the ventricles, the substance causes the muscles to seize in a violent tectonic spasm. The victims' bodies arch so severely that their spines threaten to snap against the wooden table. The sound in the room is a harrowing mixture of the victim's muffled gargles and the rhythmic thud, thud, thud of Aribert's own steady movements. He moves with the grace of a seasoned athlete, his hands never trembling, his pulse never quickening. To him, the screams are merely the mechanical output of a failing engine. Outside the heavy infirmary doors, the SS guards have learned to adapt. The screams that echo through the corridors of Mauthausen are no longer a source of alarm. One guard leans against the stone wall, lighting a cigarette, the smoke curling upward as a high-pitched, jagged wail vibrates the wood of the door. They don't check in. They don't ask if the doctor needs assistance. They have labeled this wing the Laboratory of Horrors, a place where the laws of nature and medicine have been suspended. The guards simply wait for the silence that inevitably follows, knowing that when the door finally opens, Aribert will emerge not as a man burdened by what he has seen, but as a man refreshed. His routine after a day of these orderly executions is perhaps the most chilling aspect of his tenure. After the last body is dragged out by the prisoner laborers, Aribert meticulously scrubs the chemical residue from his hands. He swaps his blood-stained apron for a crisp athletic jersey. Within the hour, he is at the camp's sports field or the swimming pool. He dives into the cold water with a perfect calculated arc, the chlorine washing away the phantom scent of magnesium and petrol. He swims laps with a vigorous, terrifying energy, his powerful muscles rippling under the surface. To the other officers, he is a picture of health and discipline, a man who can watch a human being dissolve in agony and then play a competitive game of ice hockey without a second thought. By late November, the infirmary has become a site of pure, unadulterated pathology. Aribert has stopped recording death times for the sake of efficiency. He is now recording them for the sake of curiosity. He stands over his latest subject, a man who has miraculously survived the first 3 injections, his body a trembling wreck of neurological failure. Aribert reaches for a fresh vial, his mind already calculating the next variable. But as he prepares the needle, a shadow falls across the threshold of the infirmary. It is a messenger from the commandant's office, clutching a set of sealed orders. The laboratory of horrors has been noticed, but not for the reasons Aribert might expect. The High Command has a new destination for a doctor who has proven he has no soul left to lose.
The messenger stands frozen in the doorway of the infirmary, his eyes averted from the twitching mass of what was once a man on the operating table. Aribert Heim does not look up immediately. He waits for the final violent tremor to subside, his thumb poised over the crown of his stopwatch. When the silence finally settles over the room, he clicks the timer. 28 seconds. He looks at the envelope held by the trembling messenger, his expression as flat and unreadable as a frozen lake. He takes the document, his fingers still damp with the condensation of the cold vial he had just emptied into the prisoner's chest. The orders are clear: immediate reassignment. The 6th SS Mountain Division Nord requires his services on the Northern Front. The research at Mauthausen concentration camp is over. There is no farewell ceremony, no gratitude for the efficiency he brought to the camp's mortality rates. Aribert begins to pack his office with a systematic, chilling precision. He does not see the bodies being dragged out behind him. He sees only equipment. He wraps the polished skull, the 18-year-old boy's head he had turned into a desk ornament, in a soft cloth and places it at the bottom of a wooden crate. He packs his needles, his surgical saws, and his logs of death times. To him, these are not evidence of crimes, but the trophies of a successful tenure. As he snaps his suitcase shut, the click echoes through the empty infirmary like a gunshot. He leaves the room smelling of stale ozone and the lingering metallic scent of iron-rich blood. Outside, in the gray mud of the Mauthausen courtyard, a ripple of realization passes through the skeletal ranks of the prisoners. Marcel, a hollow-cheeked former teacher from France, watches from the shadows of a barracks. He sees the black Opel staff car idling near the gate, its exhaust puffing white into the bitter November air. He sees the tall, athletic figure of the man they call Dr. Death step into the vehicle without a single backward glance. The monster is leaving. A heavy, suffocating silence descends upon the camp. There is no cheering, no relief, only the weight of the void he has left behind. The physical presence of Aribert is gone, but the psychological scars are etched into the very stones of the quarry. They know that while the doctor has moved on, the ghosts of the infirmary will never leave these walls. Year 1942, the Finnish front. The environment has shifted from the controlled slaughterhouse of the camp to the chaotic, freezing wilderness of the Soviet border. Aribert is no longer surrounded by victims in striped pajamas. He is surrounded by the elite soldiers of the Waffen-SS. Here, the biting wind screams through the pines, and the smell of antiseptic is replaced by the scent of cordite and frozen earth.
Aribert adapts instantly. He is no longer the experimental pathologist, he is the heroic combat medic. When a young soldier is brought in with a leg shattered by a Soviet mortar, Aribert operates in a tent lit by flickering lanterns, his hands steady despite the roar of artillery outside. He is calm, professional, and terrifyingly efficient. "Hold him down," Aribert commands his assistant, his voice cutting through the soldier's screams. He performs an amputation with the same detached speed he used back in Mauthausen, but here he is praised for it. To the men of the 6th SS, he is a godsend, a doctor who doesn't flinch at the sight of shredded flesh or the sound of bone saws. They see the iron cross pinned to his chest and see a savior. They do not know about the stopwatch in his pocket or the polished skull tucked away in his luggage. They see a man dedicated to saving lives, oblivious to the fact that his hands are still stained with the blood of hundreds who died for no reason other than his own curiosity. He has successfully laundered his reputation in the blood of the battlefield. As the war drags into its final desperate years, Aribert moves through the ranks with the grace of a predator shifting through high grass. He earns more medals, more respect, and a file of glowing commendations. But as the tides turn and the Soviet army begins its slow, crushing advance towards the heart of the Reich, the atmosphere changes. The rumors of the atrocities in the camps begin to leak out, whispered names and descriptions of men who turned medicine into murder. Aribert sits in a bunker, the rhythmic thud of distant bombs vibrating through his boots. He reaches into his bag and touches the smooth, cool surface of the polished skull. He knows the war is lost, but he has no intention of being a casualty. He begins to study the maps, not for the next battle, but for the ultimate exit strategy. He has mastered the art of taking life. Now he must master the art of disappearing.
Year 1945. Ludwigsburg, Germany. The air is thick with the scent of wet iron and scorched earth. The Third Reich is no longer a 1,000-year empire. It is a smoldering graveyard of concrete and ash. Aribert Heim stands in a mud-caked field, surrounded by thousands of men in tattered gray uniforms. The silver Totenkopf that once glinted on his collar has been ripped away, leaving only frayed threads and a pale rectangular shadow. He is no longer the doctor of death with a stopwatch and a mahogany desk. He is a man without a rank, a face without a history. When the soldiers of the U.S. 11th Armored Division sweep through the area, Aribert does not run. He simply holds out his hands for the restraints. His expression is flat and unreadable as a frozen lake. He is funneled into a massive POW camp, a sprawling labyrinth of barbed wire and desperation. The atmosphere is a sensory assault, the constant hum of American Jeep engines, the shouting of orders in a language he barely understands, and the pervasive stench of unwashed bodies and diesel exhaust. Inside the camp, Aribert moves with the practiced camouflage of a predator in tall grass. He does not huddle with the weeping boys or the shell-shocked veterans. He sits in the shadows, watching the American guards with a clinical, detached gaze. He is waiting for the bureaucracy of war to fail, and he knows that in a world of 1 million refugees, a single name is easy to lose. The Allied investigators are drowning in paper. They are hunting for the giants, the architects of the final solution, whose names are etched in the headlines. They are not looking for a junior medical officer from Mauthausen concentration camp, a facility whose specific horrors are only just beginning to leak out from the mouths of skeletal survivors. The centralized SS records are a mess of charred fragments and water-damaged ledgers. Aribert's name exists in the files, but the link between his face and the atrocities in the infirmary has not yet been forged. To the overworked clerks in the processing tents, he is just one more soldier in a sea of gray. During his interrogation, Aribert is a masterpiece of deception. He sits in a wooden chair under the rhythmic flick-flick of a dying light bulb, the smell of cheap American tobacco hanging in the air. He speaks in a soft, measured tone. He presents himself as a frontline medic, a man who spent his war treating frostbite and shrapnel wounds on the brutal Finnish front. He speaks of saving lives, not extinguishing them. There was no tremor in his hands, no sweat on his brow. He offers just enough detail to be believable, but never enough to be verified. The interrogators, exhausted by the sheer volume of humanity they must process, see a disciplined professional doctor. They do not see the man who boiled a boy's head for a paperweight. By late 1947, the wheels of justice have begun to grind slowly. The urgency of the denazification process is being replaced by the mundane reality of rebuilding a broken nation. Aribert stands before a final processing desk. The American officer, eyes red from lack of sleep, glances at his folder. Frontline medical service. No major war crimes flagged. The officer picks up a heavy rubber stamp. The sound of it hitting the paper, a sharp final thud, is the most beautiful sound Aribert has ever heard. The ink is black, official, and grants him a new life. He is released. He walks out of the gate and into the cold morning air, a free man in a world that has already begun to forget. He returns to his family home as if he had merely been away on a long, unremarkable deployment. The transition is seamless. He discards the prisoner's rags for a clean, pressed shirt and a wool sweater. At the dinner table, the clink of silverware against fine china replaces the sound of boots on gravel. He listens to the domestic chatter of his relatives with a polite, vacant smile, playing the role of the weary survivor. He is the lucky son, the doctor who made it back from the brink. In the evenings, he walks through the streets of his neighborhood, nodding to neighbors who see only a respectable, tall man with a promising future. The camouflage is complete. The monster has successfully donned the skin of a citizen. But Aribert knows that freedom is a fragile thing. He begins to lay the groundwork for a return to medicine, looking for a place where his past will not just be hidden, but erased. He stands before the mirror each morning, practicing the look of a man with a clean conscience, adjusting his collar until it is perfect. He is waiting for the right opportunity to step back into the world of white coats and stethoscopes. Deep in the darkness of his mind, the stopwatch is still ticking, and the clinical hunger that drove him at Mauthausen is not dead. It is merely dormant, waiting for a new environment where he can once again play God without fear of the light. Year 1954, Baden-Baden, West Germany. The town is a sanctuary of cobblestones, thermal baths, and old-world elegance. Aribert Heim steps out of his sleek Mercedes-Benz, the engine clicking as it cools in the crisp morning air. He is no longer a fugitive hiding in the shadows of a broken nation. He is a pillar of the elite. The charcoal gray uniform of the SS and the blood-stained apron of Mauthausen have been discarded for the pristine, starched white coat of a respected physician. He walks into his private practice at 21 Werderstrasse, where the scent of expensive lavender and antiseptic floor wax creates an atmosphere of safety and prestige. Here, in this wealthy enclave, the echoes of the concentration camps are nothing more than a muffled frequency, drowned out by the polite chime of a reception bell. His reputation in the community is impeccable. Among the upper-class women of Baden-Baden, Aribert is known as the gentle doctor. He possesses a clinical bedside manner that is calm, steady, and unfailingly professional. He moves through the examination rooms with a calculated grace. His large, powerful hands, the same hands that once plunged magnesium and petrol into the hearts of terrified teenagers, now delicately navigating the vulnerabilities of pregnancy and female health. There is a profound, sickening irony in his daily routine. The man who once spent his afternoons timing the expiration of human life with a stopwatch now spends his mornings monitoring the heartbeats of the unborn. He smiles at the expectant mothers, his voice a soothing baritone that masks the predatory stillness lurking beneath his skin. Outside the clinic, Aribert is a local celebrity, a man who embodies the vitality of the post-war recovery. He is a star player for the local ice hockey team, the Baden-Baden Red Devils. On the ice, he is a force of nature, tall, athletic, and dominating. Fans cheer from the stands as he slams opponents into the boards, oblivious to the fact that his aggression isn't just sportsmanship, but a sanitized outlet for a much darker impulse. After the games, he is the life of the social club, sipping fine Riesling and discussing the future of West German medicine with judges and businessmen. He is a devoted husband and a father, living in a sprawling villa that breathes success. To the world, he has been reborn, his past surgically removed and replaced with a life of domestic bliss. Yet the clinical coldness remains. In the quiet moments between appointments, Aribert sits at his mahogany desk, his fingers tracing the edge of a silver letter opener. The office is silent, save for the rhythmic, mechanical ticking of a clock on the wall. He does not think of the skeletal figures in the quarry with regret. He thinks of them as data points in a completed study. He has successfully compartmentalized his soul, locked away the memory of the polished skull he once used as a paperweight. When a patient cries out in the middle of a procedure, he doesn't flinch. He simply watches the clock, his mind reflexively calculating the duration of the pain, the efficiency of the biological process. The stopwatch from the camp may be gone, but the internal timer has never stopped. As the 1950s draw to a close, Aribert feels untouchable. The denazification trials are becoming a fading memory, and the world seems eager to look forward rather than back. He has assets, property, and a flourishing practice that brings in a small fortune. He walks through the local park, tipping his hat to the local police officers, confident that his transformation is absolute. He has built a fortress of respectability so thick that the truth should never be able to penetrate it. He is a man who has played God twice, once to destroy and now to nurture, and he believes he has gotten away with it all. But the turn of the decade brings a chill that the thermal baths cannot warm. In early 1962, a letter arrives at the clinic, not from a grateful patient, but from an official authority in Austria. Aribert doesn't open it immediately. He stares at the official seal, his hand steady, but his eyes narrowing into cold slits. The past, which he thought he had buried under layers of wealth and social standing, is beginning to hemorrhage. Investigators are starting to piece together the testimony of the few who survived his infirmary, and the name Dr. Death is being whispered once again. Aribert looks at his reflection in the window, and for a fleeting second, his white coat seems to darken. The hunter is about to become the prey, and the clock in his head begins to tick faster than ever before.
Year 1962, Baden-Baden, Germany. The air inside the regional prosecutor's office is thick with the scent of old parchment and stale tobacco. For years, the files on Mauthausen concentration camp had gathered dust, but now they are alive with a terrifying momentum. Investigators have finally secured the testimonies that cannot be ignored. Survivors who remember the tall, handsome doctor with the stopwatch. They have the names of the victims, the gruesome details of the phenol injections, and the undeniable proof that the respected gynecologist in the White Villa is a mass murderer. The arrest warrant is signed. The trap is set. In the eyes of the law, it is no longer a matter of if Aribert Heim will be caught, but how long it will take to walk him to the gallows. At his luxury villa on Schlossbergstrasse, Heim moves with the practiced, rhythmic calm of a surgeon preparing for a routine operation. The sun is dipping below the Black Forest horizon, casting long, bruised shadows across his manicured garden. He has just finished preparing dinner, a simple, warm meal of soup and crusty bread.
The steam rises in thin, swirling ribbons from the ceramic bowl, filling the kitchen with a domestic comfort that belies the monster within. He sits, a heavy silver spoon in his hand, ready to eat, when the telephone on the wall begins to ring. Its mechanical trill is sharp, intrusive, and demanding in the clinical silence of the house. He picks up the receiver. There is no hello, only a low, hurried voice on the other end, vibrating with an urgent familiarity. "The papers are signed, Aribert. They are coming for you tonight." The line goes dead with a hollow, metallic click. Heim does not tremble. He does not even sigh. He simply replaces the receiver, his movements fluid and economical. He looks back at the steaming bowl of soup on the mahogany table. He takes one single deliberate bite, then stands up. He leaves the spoon resting against the rim of the bowl. The meal is still hot, the bread still soft, but for Heim, this life is already a discarded skin. He has timed this departure as precisely as he once timed the dying breath of a prisoner. He moves through the house, grabbing a pre-packed suitcase hidden in the back of a mahogany wardrobe. There are no frantic movements, no wasted energy. He checks his pockets, a German passport, a thick envelope of cash, and a small, heavy object wrapped in velvet, a souvenir from a darker time. Outside, the evening air is crisp and biting, smelling of damp earth and pine. He slides into his silver Mercedes-Benz, the cold leather seat creaking under his weight. The engine turns over with a confident mechanical roar, the only sound in the quiet, affluent neighborhood. He doesn't look back at the villa or the life he spent 15 years building. He steers the car into the darkness, his headlights cutting through the fog like a predator's eyes, blending into the flow of evening traffic like a drop of ink in a black pool. Hours later, the silence of Schlossbergstrasse is shattered by the screech of tires and the heavy thud of boots on pavement. Police officers, led by a grim-faced inspector, swarm the villa with the intensity of a raid. They expect a struggle. They expect to find a cornered predator ready to fight for his freedom. Instead, they find a tomb. The front door is unlocked. They move from room to room with drawn weapons, their flashlights dancing over the expensive furniture and the medical trophies. When they reach the kitchen, the team freezes. The table is perfectly set. The soup is lukewarm, a thin, pale skin forming on its surface. The chair is pushed back just an inch, as if the doctor has only stepped away for a moment to answer the door. The atmosphere is thick with the scent of a meal half-eaten and a man who was already a ghost before they even arrived. The search widens across the border into the early hours of the morning. By dawn, a patrol finds the silver Mercedes-Benz abandoned near the airport in Frankfurt. The door is unlocked, the keys are gone, the interior of the car smells of expensive leather and nothing else. No fingerprints, no maps, no clues. Aribert Heim, the man who recorded the exact seconds it took for others to die, has mastered his own timing perfectly. He has vanished into the thin air of international transit, leaving behind a warm dinner and a trail that ends at a departure gate. The butcher of Mauthausen is no longer a resident of Germany. He is a shadow in the machinery of the world, and the longest manhunt in history is about to begin.
Year 1962, Vienna, Austria. Simon Wiesenthal sits in a cramped office that smells of stale tobacco and a heavy metallic scent of old filing cabinets. He is a man who lives among ghosts, surrounded by thousands of index cards detailing the architects of the Holocaust. But one file sits at the very top of his desk, its edges frayed from constant handling. It contains the testimony of the survivors from Mauthausen concentration camp, the ones who saw a tall, handsome doctor boil the head of a teenager to create a desk ornament. Simon stares at the black and white photograph of the man with the V-shaped scar. He knows that while other Nazis are hiding in the shadows of history, Aribert Heim is a living, breathing insult to every soul lost in the camps.
The hunt is no longer just a legal obligation, it is a personal obsession. The international manhunt ignites with a ferocity that spans continents. Following the disappearance from the villa in Baden-Baden, the name Aribert Heim is flashed across every border crossing in Western Europe. Interpol bulletins describe him as a man of extreme athletic build, a hunter, a doctor, and a killer. The investigators are fueled by the chilling details of his research, the stopwatches, the phenol, the surgical precision of his cruelty. They expect to find him quickly, believing a man of his stature and ego cannot remain invisible for long. But as the weeks turn into months, the trail doesn't just grow cold, it vanishes into a void of silence. A few months later, the first wave of sightings begins to flood the headquarters of the West German police. A woman in a coastal village in Spain swears she saw the doctor dining at a high-end restaurant, his posture unmistakably military. A tip from South America places him in a German colony in Chile, hidden behind the barbed wire of a private estate. Simon Wiesenthal dispatches agents to verify every whisper, but the results are always the same. They arrive to find empty hotel rooms, blurred photographs of strangers, or local authorities who suddenly suffer from a convenient lack of memory. Aribert has become a phantom, a flickering image caught in the peripheral vision of the world. The frustration in the investigation rooms becomes a palpable, suffocating weight. The lead detectives realize they aren't chasing a lone fugitive, they are fighting an invisible army. The Rat Line, the underground network of former SS officers known as Odessa, has activated its protocols. They hear the hum of a machinery designed to protect the Knights of the Reich. This network provides more than just forged passports, it provides a wall of silence. Every time the police get close, a phone rings in a darkened room, a car is waiting at a back entrance, and Aribert moves again. The investigators find themselves hitting a wall of omertà, where the scent of expensive leather and old Nazi loyalty masks the doctor's path. He isn't just running, he is being managed by professionals who view his escape as a final act of defiance against the victors of the war. As the mid-1960s approach, the search for Dr. Death becomes the longest and most expensive hunt in European history. Simon Wiesenthal refuses to let the world forget the boy with the polished skull. He publicly names Aribert the most wanted Nazi, hoping the pressure will force a mistake. But the doctor is a master of timing, a man who once measured life in seconds and now measures his survival in years. He remains a shadow in the machinery of the world, a ghost that leaves no footprints. The investigators stare at the maps of Egypt, Brazil, and Spain, feeling the mocking silence of a man who has successfully erased himself from the face of the earth. But even a ghost needs a heartbeat, and even a phantom needs to be fed. During a routine audit of abandoned assets in West Berlin, a young clerk notices a rhythmic pulse in a bank account that should have been dormant for years. It is a slow, steady drain of capital, thousands of marks being siphoned away through a series of anonymous couriers. The hunters stop looking at the horizon and start looking at the ledgers. They realize that while Aribert is invisible, his wealth is not. Someone is keeping the butcher of Mauthausen alive, and the source of the lifeblood is hidden behind a door that had remained locked since the end of the war. The chase is about to move from the streets to the vaults, where the paper trail leads directly into a darkness they never expected to find.
Year 1979, West Berlin. The air inside the archives of the Berliner Bank is thick with the scent of aged parchment and the metallic tang of filing cabinets. Investigators lean over a series of ledgers, their eyes strained under the flickering hum of fluorescent lights. They are not looking for a man, they are looking for a pulse. For years, the world assumed Aribert Heim was living off scraps in a hole, but the ledgers tell a different story. Deep within the financial records of a massive apartment complex in the Moabit district, they find a name that should have been erased from the earth in 1945. The butcher of Mauthausen is not just alive, he is a wealthy landlord. The property is a sprawling gray brick block of 39 flats. Every month, dozens of middle-class families unknowingly sign checks that funnel into the pocket of a man who once timed their ancestors' deaths with a stopwatch. The rental income is staggering, amounting to tens of thousands of Deutsche-Marks annually. It is a steady, relentless stream of capital. The investigators trace the flow of this money to a specific account, number 0031111500. They watch as the balance swells, a digital heartbeat of a phantom. But as they move to freeze the assets, they hit a wall built with paper and ink. Under West German law, Aribert remains a citizen with property rights. Without a death certificate or a specific criminal conviction in absentia that justifies seizure, the state is legally obligated to protect the assets of a mass murderer. The frustration in the room is palpable, a heavy silence broken only by the rhythmic thud of a rubber stamp. "We are essentially his accountants," one investigator mutters, throwing a file onto the mahogany table. They are forced to watch as the monster's wealth grows, shielded by the very democracy he once tried to destroy. The hunt shifts from the ledgers to the bank's lobby. The investigators know the money doesn't just sit there, it is being fed to the fugitive. They set up a perimeter, hidden behind newspapers and coffee cups in a nearby cafe. The atmosphere is freezing, the winter wind rattling the windows. They wait for a shadow to move. Every few months a withdrawal is made. It is never Aribert. Instead, they observe a series of couriers, clean-cut, inconspicuous men in wool coats who walk with the disciplined posture of former soldiers. These are the proxies of Odessa, the silent couriers of a ghost network. One afternoon, a man enters the bank. He is unremarkable, blending into the crowd of businessmen and shoppers. The investigators watch through long lens cameras as he approaches the teller. There is no whispered secret, no code word. He simply presents a power of attorney, signed with a flourish that matches the signature on Aribert's old SS files. The teller counts out stacks of high-denomination bills. The sound of the counting machine, a rapid mechanical clicking, echoes in the quiet bank. The courier slips the cash into a leather briefcase, his expression as cold as the marble floor. He exits the building, blending into the gray bustle of the Berlin streets. The investigators follow at a distance, their hearts hammering. This is the closest they have been to the butcher in 20 years. The tale is professional, moving through U-Bahn stations and crowded plazas. But the courier is a ghost within a ghost. He utilizes classic counter-surveillance, a sudden turn into a department store, an exit through a service door, a quick change of a hat. By the time the investigators reach the street corner, the briefcase and the man are gone. The money has vanished into the machinery of the underground. This pattern repeats for years. The investigators realize they are not just fighting a man, they are fighting an economy of loyalty. The family of Aribert, living in luxury back in Baden-Baden, remains tight-lipped, their lifestyle funded by the same invisible hand. They are the guardians of the secret, the beneficiaries of the blood money. As the 1970s draw to a close, the investigators realize the Berlin account is just the tip of a much larger iceberg. A decrypted letter, intercepted from a suspected Nazi sympathizer, mentions a name and a destination that turns the blood of the hunters cold. The trail of the money doesn't end in the shadows of Europe. It stretches across the Atlantic, crossing the equator towards the jagged peaks of the Andes. The butcher isn't just hiding in a city, he has built a fortress in the wilderness. The hunters pack their bags, realizing to catch a man who lives on blood money, they must follow the scent of the cash into a landscape where the law has no reach and the mountains hold secrets that refuse to die.
Year 1979, Santiago, Chile. The air is thin, tasting of iron and high-altitude dust. In the shadows of the bustling terminal, international investigators watch a woman who carries the butcher's DNA in her stride. Aribert Heim moves with a calculated calmness that feels inherited. She isn't just a tourist, she is a tether. Every suitcase she lifts, every ticket she purchases is a potential link to the man who vanished into the wind 17 years ago. The investigators stay back, their eyes hidden behind dark lenses, blending into the tapestry of travelers. They follow her south, away from the city lights, toward the jagged snow-capped teeth of the Andes. The chase moves to Puerto Montt, where the scent of the sea meets the biting chill of the mountains. Aribert is seen meeting with individuals who whisper in German, men with straight backs and old-world manners. The surveillance team operates in 24-hour shifts, the silence of their stakeout broken only by the rhythmic crackle of a radio and the hum of a heater that barely fights off the Patagonian frost. They watch her venture into the wilderness, her vehicle disappearing into mountain passes where the law feels like a distant memory. A tip arrives from a local informant, a whisper of a German doctor who operates a private clinic in a remote mountain enclave, a man who is tall, scarred, and works with a clinical precision that terrifies the locals. The atmosphere in the surveillance van is thick with the scent of stale coffee and the electric charge of anticipation. They move under the cover of a moonless night, the tires of their rugged vehicles crunching over frozen gravel. The destination is a secluded cabin-turned clinic tucked deep into a valley where the wind howls like a wounded animal. The sound of the wind is the only thing masking their approach. This is the moment they have waited for since 1962. The Dr. Death of Mauthausen, the man who once timed the seconds of agony with a stopwatch, is believed to be behind that heavy wooden door. The investigators draw their weapons, the cold steel biting into their palms. The tactical team stacks up, their breath frosting in the air like ghostly signals. With a coordinated strike, they breach. The door splinters, the sound echoing through the silent valley. The team floods the dimly lit infirmary. The smell of antiseptic in old wood smoke is overwhelming. In the center of the room stands a man, his back to them, tall and broad-shouldered. He is wearing a white coat, the same garment Aribert Heim wore when he stood over the dying in the camps. "Hands up, police!" The man turns slowly, his face illuminated by the harsh, flickering glare of tactical lights. The investigators hold their breath, their hearts hammering against their ribs. The silence that follows is deafening. The man is indeed German. He is indeed a doctor. But as he raises his hands, the light reveals a face that is not Aribert. The scars are in the wrong places. The eyes, though cold, lack the specific predatory void of the man they seek. A frantic check of documents and a tense interrogation reveal a different name, a different past. The German doctor is a phantom, a local legend built on the remnants of a Nazi diaspora that has turned South America into a hall of mirrors. The crushing weight of failure sinks into the room, more bitter than the mountain cold. They had spent months following the money, tracking the daughter, and surviving the Andes, only to find a dead end. The lead that seemed so certain has evaporated into the thin mountain air. They realize with a sickening clarity that they have been chasing a ghost across an entire continent. As they descend the mountain, the lead investigator looks back at the sprawling, infinite peaks of the Andes. He realizes that while they were chasing shadows in the snow, Aribert was never here. The money transfers, the sightings, the daughter's travels, they were all a masterclass in misdirection, a trail of breadcrumbs designed to keep the world looking west. far across the ocean, in a climate of sand and dust rather than ice and pine, a tall man with a scarred face sits in a humid hotel room. He picks up a local newspaper, his fingers steady, and begins to read. He has not just disappeared, he has evolved. The butcher of Mauthausen has shed his skin, and as he steps out into the sweltering heat of a new continent, he knows the hunt has been looking in the wrong direction for decades.
Year 1963, Cairo, Egypt. The air is a thick, choking mixture of diesel exhaust, roasted chickpeas, and the ancient dust of the Sahara. A man walks through the crowded terminal of the Ramses station, his head nearly a foot higher than the sea of commuters around him. Aribert Heim does not move with the frantic energy of a traveler. He moves with the calculated, heavy tread of a predator entering a new territory. To the Egyptian authorities, he is merely a tourist with a sturdy Austrian passport. To the world, he is a ghost. But as he steps into the blinding midday sun, the heat pressing against his skin like a physical weight, he knows the shadows of the Black Forest are finally behind him. He finds refuge in the frantic heart of the city, checking into the Qasr El Medina Hotel. It is a place where questions are as rare as a cool breeze. The establishment is a labyrinth of narrow corridors and peeling wallpaper, tucked away near the bustling Al-Azhar district. Aribert pays for his room in cash, the bills crisp and smelling of European banks. He does not ask for a room with a view of the Nile. He chooses a cramped space at the back, where the window looks out onto an alleyway of drying laundry and the constant rhythmic hum of the city's industrial underbelly. In this cheap, crowded environment, a man of his stature should stand out, but Cairo is a city of millions, a place where the sheer volume of humanity creates its own kind of invisibility. As the weeks turn into months, the tourist who arrived with a single suitcase shows no signs of leaving. Most foreigners visit the pyramids and retreat to the luxury of the Hilton, but Aribert remains in the dust of the old city. He begins the process of surgical erasure. The sharp, clinical shave he maintained for decades, the look of the disciplined SS officer, is the first thing to go. Day by day, a thick salt and pepper beard begins to mask the prominent scarred jawline that once defined his military portraits. He discards the stiff collars and leather shoes of his life in Baden-Baden, replacing them with the loose, flowing fabrics of the local attire. He is no longer the athletic doctor of the German elite. He is becoming a shadow in the sun. He spends his afternoons at the nearby cafes, nursing a single cup of bitter tea for hours. He listens to the cadence of Arabic, watching the way the locals navigate the chaos of the streets. He observes the police patrols with a flat, detached gaze, his pulse never quickening. He has spent years measuring the seconds it takes for a heart to stop beating. He understands the mechanics of pressure and knows that as long as he remains calm, the world will see exactly what he wants them to see. He becomes a fixture of the neighborhood, the tall, silent foreigner who speaks little but watches everything with eyes that seem to see right through the skin. While he sits in the humid shade of a Cairo alleyway, the international press is a world away, caught in a frenzy of misinformation. Headlines in Europe and Israel scream of sightings in the Chilean Lake District or the high altitudes of the Andes. Simon Wiesenthal and his team of hunters are poring over maps of South America, convinced that Dr. Death is hiding in a Nazi colony near the equator. Aribert reads these reports in discarded international newspapers with a thin, razor-sharp smile. The misdirection he planted, the bank transfers, the daughter's travels, is working with clinical perfection. The world is hunting a ghost in the snow, while the flesh and blood killer is breathing the hot, dry air of the Middle East. But by the late 60s, the novelty of hiding is replaced by a cold, practical realization. Being a permanent tourist is a liability. It invites curiosity from the secret police and the curious eyes of neighbors.
One evening, as the call to prayer vibrates through the thin floorboards of his hotel room, Aribert stands before a cracked mirror. He traces the edge of his long gray beard, his eyes cold and analytical. He realizes that to truly survive the decades to come, he cannot just be a man in hiding. He must be reborn. He needs a new soul, a new history, and a name that will act as a permanent shroud. He looks out at the minarets piercing the twilight sky and realizes that his next move will not just hide his past, it will rewrite his entire existence.
Year 1980, Cairo, Egypt. The sweltering heat of the afternoon sun presses down on the narrow alleys of the Al-Azhar district, thick with the scent of roasted cumin, exhaust fumes, and ancient dust. A tall, elderly man with a silver-gray beard and a face mapped by deep, weathered lines steps out of the shadows. He is no longer wearing the sharp, tailored suits of a Baden-Baden physician. Instead, he wears a simple, flowing galabeya, his movements slow and deliberate, carrying a quiet dignity that commands immediate respect from the merchants lining the street. He moves toward the entrance of the local mosque, the rhythmic call to prayer vibrating through the humid air and shaking the very marrow of his bones. Inside the cool, dim interior of the prayer hall, the man who was once the butcher of Mauthausen kneels upon a worn rug. Before a small group of witnesses, he recites the Shahada, his voice steady and devoid of a tremor. With a single public declaration of faith, Aribert Heim ceases to exist in the eyes of the community. In his place stands Tariq Farid Hussein. The silver Totenkopf he once wore on his lapel has been replaced by the invisible shroud of a convert. He bows his head to the floor, the same forehead that once tilted with clinical curiosity over a stopwatch as he watched men die, now pressing against the threadbare carpet in an act of ultimate, calculated submission. Life in the neighborhood of Garden City adapts to the presence of the tall, soft-spoken German with remarkable speed. Tariq becomes a fixture of the local ecosystem. Every morning he can be found sitting in a small public park, the air humming with the sound of distant traffic and the chirping of sparrows. He holds a book, often a thick volume on philosophy or a medical text, but his eyes frequently drift to the horizon, scanning the crowds with the practiced peripheral vision of a man who has spent 2 decades expecting a hand on his shoulder. To the locals, he is a man of deep contemplation, a holy man who has left the decadence of the West for the spiritual purity of the East. The irony is a jagged blade hidden in silk. The hands that once injected petrol into the hearts of terrified teenagers now gently take the pulse of an elderly neighbor complaining of chest pains. Tariq does not practice medicine officially, that would be a death sentence of exposure, but he offers advice. He speaks in low, soothing tones about circulation, diet, and the importance of rest. He becomes the neighborhood's unofficial apothecary, a man whose medical knowledge is whispered to be vast and mysterious. When he touches the arm of a sick man, his fingers are cool and steady, his gaze analytical. The neighbors see a healer. Only Tariq knows that he is simply using the same data he gathered in the infirmaries of the Reich to maintain his mask. As the months turn into years, the children of the district begin to congregate around him. They call him Tariq, Uncle Tariq. To them, he is the kind grandfather who always has a piece of candy or a gentle word. They chase each other around his bench, their laughter echoing through the park, oblivious to the fact that the man smiling at them once curated a collection of human skulls for his desk. He watches them play with a detached paternal warmth, a ghost living a second life in a paradise built upon a foundation of unpunished bones. He has found the perfect camouflage, the reverence of the innocent. By the mid-1980s, Tariq Farid Hussein is more than a resident, a man whose piety is never questioned. He has achieved the impossible.
turning the world's most intense manhunt into a forgotten memory by hiding behind a prayer rug and a beard. But the mask of the holy man is a heavy burden, and even in the stifling heat of Cairo, a cold draft occasionally blows through the cracks. In the quiet hours of the night, as he sits alone in his room, Tarek hears the silence of the city, a silence that reminds him of the soundproof walls of Mauthausen. He knows that as long as he remains a shadow, he is safe, but even the most perfect shadow can be betrayed by a single errant flash of light, and the curiosity of his neighbors is beginning to shift from respect to something far more dangerous.
Year 1984, Cairo, Egypt. The Qasr El Madina Hotel is a modest establishment tucked away in the labyrinthine district of Souk El Tawfiqiyah. The air here is thick with the scent of fried garlic, roasted coffee, and the constant gritty dust of the city. Mahmoud, the hotel owner, sits behind a scarred wooden desk, watching his most loyal tenant descend the stairs. To Mahmoud, the man is Tarek Farid Hussein, a tall, lean, and strikingly dignified German who converted to Islam years ago. He is a man of clockwork habits, a holy man who never misses a prayer and speaks with a soft, melodic tone. He is the neighborhood's secret treasure, a foreigner who chose their dust over European marble. Tarek's presence in the hotel is marked by an eerie, disciplined silence. He occupies room 610, a Spartan space that smells faintly of antiseptic and old paper. Despite the sweltering Egyptian heat, he is always impeccably groomed. He is a giant among the locals, his frame still echoing the strength of the ice hockey player he once was in a lifetime he has worked so hard to bury. Mahmoud observes him with a mixture of respect and curiosity. The German never complains about the noise of the street or the lack of amenities. He pays his rent in crisp banknotes, always on time, and spends his afternoons sitting in the lobby or at the nearby Groppi cafe, sipping tea and reading. But there is a boundary around him, an invisible line that no one is permitted to cross. The most peculiar aspect of Tarek's life is his relationship with the mail. He receives frequent packages from Germany, mostly books, thick academic volumes on medicine, philosophy, and history. To the hotel staff, it seems he is merely a scholar, but inside the privacy of room 610, the books serve a darker purpose. He carefully pries open the bindings or searches between the pages for thin, translucent sheets of paper. These are letters from his family in Baden-Baden, sent through a complex network of couriers to avoid detection by international authorities. He reads about the children he abandoned and the life he left behind, his face a mask of stone. He writes back, hiding his own messages within the pages of books he sends back to Europe, a ghost communicating through the ink of others. However, there is one thing Tarek fears more than the Egyptian secret police or the Mossad: the camera. In a city where tourists and locals alike are constantly capturing the vibrant street life, he moves like a shadow, flitting between the light. He has managed to live in Cairo for decades without a single official photograph being taken. When he needs government documents, he uses charms, bribes, or claims religious objections to avoid the lens. He knows that his face, the high forehead, the piercing eyes, the distinct scar on his cheek, is a death warrant. If his image were to reach the desk of Simon Wiesenthal, the sanctuary of the Qasr El Madina would evaporate in an instant. This fragility of this mask is tested on a blistering afternoon in the late 1980s. Tarek is walking near the hotel when a young local man, proud of a newly acquired camera, raises the device to capture a candid shot of the distinguished sheikh.
The shutter clicks. In that microsecond, the gentle holy man vanishes. Tarek lunges with a speed that defies his age. His hand, once used to steady a stopwatch over a dying prisoner at Mauthausen, clamps onto the young man's wrist like a vice. His eyes, usually cast downward in humility, ignite with a cold, predatory blue light. "No photos," he hisses, his voice no longer melodic, but vibrating with the authority of an SS officer. He doesn't just ask for the film, he demands it with a terrifying, quiet violence that leaves the young man trembling. The young man hands over the film, stammering apologies, as Tarek crushes the canister in his palm. The crowd that had gathered watches in stunned silence as the kind Uncle Tarek adjusts his robe, his face instantly returning to a serene piety. He walks away, his cane tapping rhythmically against the pavement, leaving the neighborhood to whisper about the monster they just glimpsed beneath the skin of the saint. Mahmoud, the hotel owner, watches from the doorway, realizing for the first time that his guest isn't hiding from the world, he is hiding the world from himself. But as the years pass and Tarek's health begins to fail, the iron discipline that kept the butcher of Mauthausen hidden is starting to rust, and the secrets he has kept for 30 years are beginning to rot within the walls of room 610.
Year 2009, Cairo, Egypt. The sun bakes the sandstone walls of the Qasr El Medina Hotel, a crumbling establishment tucked away in the labyrinthine district of Muski. For decades, the world's most elite Nazi hunters had been scouring the high-altitude forests of the Andes and the coastal villas of Spain, chasing a phantom that had already turned to dust in their hands. While the moss grew over the false trails in South America, the real ghost had been hiding in plain sight, living in a room that smelled of jasmine tea and old sweat. A small team of investigators and journalists arrives at the hotel, not with handcuffs, but with questions for a man who is no longer there to answer them. The hotel owner's son, Tarek Mahmoud, leads the group away from the humid bustle of the lobby and toward a cramped, windowless storage room near the back of the building. The air here is stagnant, heavy with the scent of dry rot and the metallic tang of old iron. He gestures toward a corner where a single battered brown briefcase sits atop a pile of discarded linens. It is coated in a layer of gray silt so thick it obscures the texture of the leather. For 17 years, this object has been a silent tenant to the hotel, an anchor to a past that the neighborhood of El Azhar had nearly forgotten. One of the investigators reaches out, his fingers leaving deep grooves in the silt as he grips the handle. The leather is brittle, groaning under the pressure. With a sharp, rhythmic click, the rusted latches spring open, releasing a cloud of fine, choking dust that dances in the beam of a flashlight. Inside, the briefcase is a time capsule of a fractured identity. The contents are packed with clinical precision. No space is wasted. At the very top lie several Islamic prayer books, their green covers faded by time, alongside a well-worn copy of the Quran. To any casual observer, these were the mundane possessions of Tariq Farid Hussein, the pious old man who had spent his afternoons leaning on a cane. But beneath the religious texts, the atmosphere of the room shifts. The investigator pulls away a layer of Egyptian newspapers to reveal a yellowed envelope. Inside is a residence permit issued by the Egyptian authorities, bearing the photograph of an elderly man with a long white beard and a deep scar slicing across his right cheek. Beside it lies a document that makes the air in the storage room feel suddenly frigid, a German passport. The name printed on the faded paper isn't Tarek, it is Aribert Heim. The
The two identities, the Saint of Cairo and the Butcher of Mauthausen, lay pressed against each other in the darkness, finally forced into the light. As they dig deeper, the holy man begins to dissolve, replaced by the ghost of the SS physician. They find over 100 documents, personal letters, bank statements, and most chillingly, detailed medical records. These are not the haphazard notes of a patient, but the meticulous observations of a surgeon. There are anatomical sketches drawn with a steady, practiced hand, and files containing blood test results and x-rays. He had spent his years in hiding, treating his own body like a laboratory specimen, tracking his internal decay with the same cold, detached efficiency he had once used to record the death agonies of teenagers in the Austrian mud. Among the papers, they find a handwritten journal filled with dense German script. It isn't a diary of repentance or a record of prayers. It is a technical ledger. As the investigator flips through the pages, he realizes that even while living as a humble convert, Aribert had never truly stopped being the man with the stopwatch. The notes reveal a mind still obsessed with the mechanics of survival and the cold data of the human frame. But as they reach the final documents at the very bottom of the briefcase, they find a medical report that suggests the doctor's ultimate experiment was one he could not control. The date on the paper points to a moment in the early 90s when the hunter and the prey finally met in the same mirror, and the secret he left behind in room 610 is about to expose exactly how the world's most wanted man spent his final hour.
The medical report in the bottom of the briefcase is not a victim's record. It is a self-portrait of a predator in decay. The handwriting is steady, clinical, and devoid of fear, even as it describes the terminal spread of colorectal cancer within his own body. Aribert Heim, the man who once timed the screams of the dying with a stopwatch, spent his final months documenting his own dissolution with the same chilling detachment he applied to the prisoners of Mauthausen concentration camp. He did not seek a priest, he sought data. Year 1992, Cairo, Egypt. The heat in room 610 of the Qasr El Medina Hotel is stifling, thick with the scent of old paper and the metallic tang of illness. Aribert sits by the window, his frame skeletal, his skin like parchment stretched over bone. He watches the city move below, a ghost among the living. On August 10th, the stopwatch finally stops. The man the neighborhood knew as Tariq Farid Hussein breathes his last, not in a prison cell or on a gallows, but in a bed surrounded by neighbors who believe they are losing a saint. He dies on the very day the 1992 Summer Olympics conclude, slipping away into the chaos of a celebrating world. The burial is swift and anonymous. His son, Rudiger, who had secretly visited his father in his final days, watches as the body is lowered into a nameless grave in the cemetery for the poor. There are no markers, no SS runes, and no mention of the butcher who once presided over the laboratory of horrors. The neighborhood children mourn Uncle Tariq, the kind man who gave them sweets, never knowing that the hands that patted their heads had once surgically removed the heart of a living human being for a medical curiosity. Year 2012, Baden-Baden, Germany. 2 decades after his quiet death, the legal machinery of the West finally catches up to the reality of the sand. A district court judge sits before a mountain of evidence: DNA from the Cairo briefcase, testimonies from the hotel owner, and the confirmation from his own family. The gavel falls with a hollow, echoing thud. The case against Aribert Heim is officially closed. The court rules that the butcher of Mauthausen is indeed deceased, ending the longest and most frustrating manhunt in modern history. The warrant is retracted, the files are boxed, the hunt is over.
For the aging survivors of Mauthausen, the news is a second trauma. They had lived for 70 years hoping to see him in a glass booth, to see the clinical mask slip under the weight of justice. Instead, they are met with the realization that Aribert won. He outran the hangman, outsmarted the Mossad, and lived a longer, more peaceful life than any of the thousands he butchered. He died a beloved man, while the names of his victims were long ago lost to the mud of the Austrian quarries. The irony is a poison that no court can neutralize. In the archives of the investigators, the most haunting relic remains, the description of the skull paperweight. Somewhere in the vast, shifting sands of time, that polished bone, once the head of an 18-year-old boy with a perfect smile, remains a silent witness to a doctor who never repented. Aribert Heim's legacy is not just the deaths he caused, but the silence he left behind. As the lights dim on the case, the image remains: the stopwatch, the needle, and the smooth, white surface of a skull, resting on a desk in a dark room where the screaming never truly stops.
Aribert Heim spent his life hiding in the open, a ghost among the living, proving that sometimes the most terrifying monsters aren't the ones under the bed, but the ones holding the stethoscope. The scalpel may be rusted and the camp may be silent, but the echoes of his victims still demand a justice that time almost allowed him to outrun. If you felt the chill of history today, subscribe to The Killer's Record and hit the notification bell. Like this video to help us bring these stories out of the shadows, and comment below, can a man ever truly outrun his past?